The book was found beneath broken shelves in the corner of the cellar. Dust clung to the cover, the leather warped and splitting. When opened, the pages released a faint smell of damp rot, as though they had absorbed the weight of years. The first entries were neat, careful, the handwriting steady, though a sense of unease began to creep forward the longer one read. Each page carried a date, each date tightening into a noose around the one who wrote them. March 3. He wrote that the house was colder than he expected. He had moved in alone, choosing it for the quiet and the distance from town. The boards creaked with every step, but the roof was sound and the cellar dry. The isolation appealed to him. He noted how silence could be a companion when one learned not to resist it. He signed the first entry with a flourish, almost proud of his new solitude. March 5. He described the night winds, how they pressed against the windows and made the shutters shift. He thought he heard something tapping in the walls. At first he blamed mice, but the sound was heavier, as if fingernails grazed the plaster. He reminded himself that houses had their own music. Still, he ended the entry with the thought that he would sleep more easily if the sound did not seem to follow him from room to room. March 7. The entry grew longer. He admitted he had begun speaking aloud to himself, not for comfort, but to test the air. He felt that the rooms listened. He wrote that when he crossed the threshold of the cellar door, a pressure grew behind his eyes, and that silence in that part of the house was no silence at all, but a listening void. He could not explain why he locked the cellar at night, only that he had to. March 9. He mentioned the smell. A faint sweetness, metallic, like fruit that has just begun to rot. It came strongest in the evenings. He searched for spoiled food, damp wood, mildew, but nothing matched. He wrote that the smell seemed to breathe, swelling when he passed certain corners, vanishing when he tried to trace it. He added in sharp strokes that he had begun dreaming of corridors that bent back upon themselves, doors opening into identical rooms, each one empty but expectant. March 12. His writing grew tighter. He described hearing steps overhead while lying in bed. The steps were measured, patient, yet when he rose to check, the hallway was still. He wrote that the boards pressed down as if under weight, then released with a sigh when the steps halted. He could not bring himself to call them echoes. He wrote that he had counted each one, and that they paused outside his door before fading into silence. March 14. The entry began with an apology, as though to himself. He admitted he had whispered questions into the air, expecting no answer. He asked, "Who else is here?" and waited. He asked, "What do you want?" and strained his ears. He wrote that he heard nothing, but the house itself seemed to tighten, as if holding breath. He ended by saying he had moved the bed, so he could see the door from where he lay. March 15. His tone shifted. He wrote that he found a mark on the wall above the cellar stairs. It was faint at first, like soot rubbed into wood, but the longer he stared, the clearer it became. A handprint too long, the fingers stretched beyond proportion. He pressed his own hand against it and noted how the blackened print extended above his fingertips. He left the page unfinished, the last line trailing off in ink that smeared where his pen had paused. March 18. The pages bore darker ink. He confessed he had begun keeping lamps lit even at dawn. Shadows seemed thicker, less willing to recede. He wrote that when he turned his back, he felt a presence leaning near, so close he could sense breath against his neck, though the air was cold. He mentioned hearing his name spoken in the tone of his own voice, yet distant, coming from the stairwell. He refused to descend. March 20. His words fractured, sentences breaking apart. He described standing before the cellar door with the key in hand, but being unable to move. He felt drawn downward, compelled, but he knew the smell would be stronger there. He wrote that he thought he saw movement through the gap under the door. Not shadow, not light, but something shifting. He confessed he wanted to burn the house, but lacked the strength to leave it. He ended with the words, "It waits." March 22. He wrote that he had woken to find the diary open beside him. He was certain he had closed it. The lamp burned low, though he had turned it high before sleep. He admitted that the last line on the previous page was not in his hand. He had no memory of writing the words. He copied them. "It waits." The letters were darker, pressed deep into the paper, the strokes uneven as if carved. March 25. The handwriting shook. He explained he had locked the diary away, hidden it beneath loose boards, yet when he woke, it lay on the table, open to a blank page. He claimed his hands ached, as if he had been writing all night. He described dreams of voices speaking in a chorus, low and steady, each word threading into the next until meaning dissolved. He believed the house was listening through him. He feared his thoughts were not entirely his own. March 28. The entry began mid-sentence. He wrote of doors slamming in rhythm with his heartbeat. He wrote of mirrors clouding when he passed. He wrote that the handprint above the cellar stairs had multiplied. Now 5 prints stretched across the wall, all too long, reaching upward like grasping figures. He declared he no longer trusted the daylight, for the house grew dim no matter how wide he opened the windows. He wrote, "It is not outside me. It is here." March 30. The handwriting broke into scrawls. He wrote that he had awoken to the diary moving across the table, the pages turning though no wind stirred. Words appeared as he watched, strokes dragging across the paper though no pen touched them. He copied what the unseen hand had written. "You invited me." The ink glistened wet when he touched it, staining his fingers black. He ended with one line, "I think it uses my mouth when I sleep." April 1. The page was entirely covered in writing, the lines overlapping, as if he could not stop. He wrote of seeing himself standing in the corner of the room, while lying in bed, unable to move. He wrote that the figure had his face but stretched, the features too wide, the smile too sharp. He wrote that it watched him without blinking until dawn broke, then dissolved into shadow. He wrote that the diary had begun whispering at night. He pressed his ear to the pages and heard breathing. April 3. He claimed the diary no longer required his hand. The ink flowed as he watched, words etching themselves in loops and scratches. The voice he had heard in dreams now filled the room when the writing began, though no mouth spoke. He wrote, or perhaps the diary wrote, that he was only the vessel, that the house had always been occupied, and that every tenant before him had left something behind. He declared he could not leave, for his part was not yet finished. April 6. The page was divided. One half bore his frantic words, begging anyone who found the book to close it, to bury it, to burn the house. The other half held smooth, deliberate writing that was not his. That hand wrote, "He belongs to us now. He is written." The two writings clashed on the page, his desperate script breaking, the other calm and measured, like a teacher correcting a student. The ink of both soaked through the paper. April 9th. The diary had changed. The entries no longer carried dates but only markings, symbols that grew across the margins. Amid them, a few words emerged. "The door is open." He wrote nothing else. The rest of the page seemed written by something else, the letters jagged, almost clawed into the parchment. The ink bled through, staining the next 3 sheets, as if it refused to remain contained. April 12th. This was the last full entry in his hand. He confessed he could no longer tell if he was awake. He wrote that the figure with his face now walked the rooms in daylight, that it moved silently, touching walls as though claiming them. He wrote that he felt lighter each morning, as if something hollowed him out while he slept. He begged again for whoever read the diary to end it, but the plea broke into repetitions of the same line. "It writes me." The following pages carried no steady hand. Instead, words scrawled themselves across paper in ink both black and brown, sometimes smudged, sometimes gouged into the parchment. The sentences spiraled, phrases repeating. "We are here. We are written." The house breathes through him. The door is open. And beneath these repetitions, faint indentations pressed into the paper without ink, as if something invisible dragged claws across the sheets, scratching words that only the touch of light could reveal. The diary did not end. It simply stopped where the paper ran out. Yet on the inside of the back cover, faint and desperate, his last words had been etched with a shaking hand. "If you are reading this, you are already part of it." The basement remained still after the diary ended, though the air seemed heavier around it. Dust settled where no hand had stirred it. The book lay open on the floor, its pages refusing to close, the words inside waiting for eyes. Whoever found it could not escape the pull of the ink. The story did not end with the last entry. It began again with the one who read. The man who discovered the diary had come to the house not as a tenant, but as a wanderer. He had heard whispers of the property, how it stood empty for years, how its windows reflected more than what stood before them. He broke the lock at dusk, carrying only a lantern. The rooms above were stripped bare, but the cellar door drew him down. There, beneath a rotting shelf, he uncovered the book. He did not mean to open it. His hand moved as though guided. The first pages drew him deeper, their words shaping a portrait of another man, one who had come before. The wanderer read of the cold air, the handprints, the voice in the walls. He read of the diary writing itself. He read of the plea etched in the back cover, If you are reading this, you are already part of it." He laughed once, a brittle sound. Then he turned the page. There was new writing, not of the past. Fresh ink, wet beneath his fingertips, glistened in the lantern's glow. The page carried his own name. He had never told it aloud in this house. The book should not have known. The letters pressed deep into the paper, shaped with cruel precision. Beneath the name was a line, "You have arrived. We continue." His breath caught. The cellar door groaned though he had closed it behind him. The lantern flickered. He stepped back, but the book turned its own page, paper scraping paper. More words unfurled in black script, read aloud. "Give us voice." He tried to close it, but the cover resisted, heavy as stone. His fingers trembled. He read. The air thickened when he spoke the words. Each syllable carried weight, vibrating through the beams overhead. He felt the house lean closer. The text commanded him line by line. "Describe the room. Describe what you see." His voice cracked as he obeyed, naming the shelves, the lantern, the stone floor. The moment he described them, the ink confirmed his words, writing them as he spoke. The diary swallowed his voice whole, transcribing every sound into permanence. He tried to stop but found his tongue moving, shaping words not his own. The shadows gather in the corners. He had not meant to say it. The words left his mouth anyway. When he looked, the shadows had thickened. The diary demanded more. "Describe what waits at the edge of sight." His throat tightened, but the words slid free. "It has no shape but many eyes. It leans against the door. It listens." As he spoke, the lantern dimmed. The door behind him shuddered. Something pressed against it, not with force but with patience. He dropped the lantern, but it did not break. The flame shrank into a coil of smoke. Only the words in the diary glowed, black ink shining like wet oil. He ran. The cellar steps rose before him. Each board bent under his weight, but did not break. Yet as he climbed, the sound of another set of steps matched his own, slower, deliberate. He reached the top. The door had no handle. He beat against it, but the wood held firm. When he turned, the lantern was at the bottom of the stairs, though he had dropped it beside the book. Its flame burned steady again. The diary rested open beside it, and the page had filled itself. "You cannot leave until it is written." He descended again, helpless, and lifted the book. His hands shook, but he could not release it. Each page that followed was blank, waiting. His reflection stared back at him from the sheen of wet ink, though there was no mirror. The book wrote as he moved. He turns. He breathes. He waits. He stopped breathing, but the words continued. He cannot hold breath forever. He inhales again. His lungs filled against his will. His chest ached as though strings pulled his body into rhythm with the script. Night bled into day, though he did not see the sun. The cellar remained constant, yet time scraped past in the pages. The diary chronicled each moment, whether he spoke or not. When he closed his eyes, words filled the blank spaces. He closes his eyes. He dreams what we give him. The dreams followed at once. Corridors folded over themselves. Doors opened into rooms that were never empty. Figures with stretched faces lined the walls, mouths sewn shut, yet he heard them chant, "We are written. We are kept." When he woke, the words had already recorded the dream in his place. He was no longer the author, no longer even the subject. He was the ink itself. On the third day, the book demanded more. "Write with your hand." He resisted, clutching the pen until his knuckles whitened, but his fingers loosened against his will. Ink dripped across the page, shapes forming beneath his unwilling hand. Symbols, not letters, spiraled outward. They resembled eyes without lids, mouths without teeth. Each line pulsed as if alive. When he dropped the pen, the lines moved still, curling toward the margins. He staggered back, but the words rose like whispers. "Do not leave us unfinished." He picked up the pen again. The writing spread faster than he could follow. Pages filled, turned themselves, filled again. The book grew heavier in his lap, as though it swallowed his strength with each word. His skin prickled. When he touched his arm, ink smudged beneath his fingers. The words were not bound to the paper anymore. They crawled across his skin, spelling themselves in lines that burned cold. He scraped at them, tearing skin, but they returned deeper, etched like veins. His body was becoming script. The house answered. Floors groaned, walls swelled, air quivered with each stroke of the pen. He heard voices between boards, not whispers but rehearsals, as if preparing to speak through him. The cellar smelled of rust, of iron-soaking wood. He pressed his hand to the wall and felt a pulse. The house lived, but not alone. It carried the weight of many voices, many lives written into its bones. The diary was only its tongue. On the 5th day, he stopped resisting. His eyes hollowed, but his hand did not tire. He wrote names he had never known, places he had never seen, events that had not happened yet. Each name echoed through the beams above. Each place bent the air into shapes. Each event carved itself into silence that stretched too long. He felt no hunger, no thirst. Only the book fed him, and the book demanded endlessly. The writing no longer confined itself to pages. Words spread across the cellar floor, burned into wood grain. They rose on the walls like mold. The ceiling bore sentences that dripped like wet tar. The lantern dimmed but did not extinguish, fueled by the script itself. He was not in a room anymore. He was inside the diary. On the 7th day, the book spoke without words. Its pages moved in a storm of fluttering, ink spraying into air like spores. The lines swirled around him, covering his face, his chest, his eyes. He could not scream. Ink filled his mouth. The words did not choke him but poured through him, spilling from his throat in a voice that was not his. The house shook. Dust fell from beams. Every wall trembled with the force of his borrowed speech. The door is open. Something answered. Not from outside, but from beneath, deeper than the cellar floor. Boards split. A crack widened, black and endless, and from it rose a sound like breath drawn through hollow bones. He dropped the diary, but it clung to him still, the cover fused to his palm. His body arched as the crack deepened. From its depths, long hands reached, fingers stretched too far, nails scratching letters into stone. They pressed against him not to seize, but to write. His skin split into script. His voice followed, "We are written. We are endless." No further pages recorded his fate. The diary closed itself, the ink drying into silence. It lay again beneath the broken shelf, waiting. Dust covered it once more. Time passed. The cellar remained sealed, though footsteps sometimes echoed above, though no one lived there. Years later, the house was bought again. New owners arrived, drawn by the low price, the quiet land, the promise of space. They laughed at the creaks, at the smell of damp earth. They spoke of renovations. They explored room by room until they found the cellar door. It was locked, but locks are only barriers until tested. They descended with flashlights. They noticed the shelves, the dust, the silence. One of them saw the book. The cover cracked as it opened. The first page bore no date, no name. Only one line stretched across it, written in fresh black ink, "You are the next to read." The story did not stop. It could not. Each reader became the next entry. Each entry was another voice added to the chorus. The house did not need walls to hold them. The diary was enough. It would wait until opened again, until eyes met the words, until voices filled its pages once more. And when that happened, the script would spread further, beyond cellar, beyond house, beyond the paper that bound it. Somewhere, even as the book lay silent, words pressed against the edges of reality, waiting to be spoken. They shaped themselves in the dark. "We are here. We are written. You are reading. Now you belong."